Hey guys, welcome back to the Compass Games Learn to Play series. Today we welcome first-time designer Ted Castronova, and he's going to be giving us a detailed explanation and teach of his new game, 2040, An American Insurgency. So without further ado, over to you, Ted.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ted Castronova. I'm the designer of this thing you're looking at, this picture of the country I live in, the United States. My goal tonight is to give you an overview of how the game goes. I'm not going to explain every single little detail in the rule book, but by the end of the video, you ought to be able to sit down and be a little bit dangerous with some of the pieces in front of you. And in doing this, I don't know if it'll succeed or not, but it is the method that I use when I teach games at my university. So we're going to put to test the idea of whether eggheads academics really know what they're talking about. Right? No guarantees, but I'll do the best I can. Okay, so what is our game? Our game tonight is 2040, an American Insurgency. And just a little background on that game. Back in 2018, I started to hear people put articles out saying, the United States is heading for a civil war. And I started thinking about doing a civil war in the United States in the future. And I'm sad to say that as the years have gone by, this likelihood hasn't gone down. And I've played enough Civil War type games, like modern Civil War type games, not blue versus gray, to know that they're ugly and dirty. And I'm sure viewers who've played Andean Abyss or A Distant Plain, Fire in the Lake, it's awful. And we wouldn't want to have that happen here. So the underlying purpose of the game is to develop these mechanics as realistically as possible for our country. And then on the one hand, people can have fun like working out the scenario in kind of a black humor sort of way. But then the underlying message is we really don't want to do this. We don't want to have people opening fire in Overton Park, Kansas. Like that's just not anything we want to have happen. But this game is like what it would look like if it did happen, and you're going to see that there's just fighting everywhere and through the cards and everything. That it's not fun fighting. It's ugly. So let's dive into it. The first thing I'd like to do is give you a little overview of the components. You're looking at the map. It's the map of the United States. Let's look at the areas that are outlined in red. Those are called regions. So we have a region called Plains up here. We have Big Sky region up here, Cascadia over here. These regions are all, like I said, divided by the red lines. There are state lines that you can see. They don't have any game effect. I just put them in there so that you can kind of see the regions as collections of states. One map feature I'd like to point out is how West Virginia zips up here to Lake Erie. Why is that? Because I've found in my travels that you simply can't get from the East Coast region to the Midwest, where I live, the Midwest, without going through either Appalachia or very roundabout to the south and up. This mountain region really does divide the east coast of the country from the heartland, the inner parts. So that doesn't follow a state boundary perfectly, but it has a gameplay purpose. Another thing is California gets split in half. So the top half of it goes to Cascadia and the bottom half goes to Mesa. Those are the regions. Now there are urban areas, like here's Denver, right here you can see. Urban areas have two kinds of spaces in them. You have inner city spaces that are the yellow, and then the suburbs. Okay, the city and the suburbs. And the artist Ilya did a good job of having these skylines, like they're Atlanta, DC, New York. So he made an effort to make the skylines kind of look like the city's actual skyline. And regions and suburbs and cities have these little numbers on them. Those are basically victory points. What they represent is population size. And the point of the game for both players is to try to get as much population on their side as possible. So you can see, like, Texas is big. It's got 3 in its region, 2 in Dallas City, and 3 in Dallas suburb. And Dallas is representing the other big cities in Texas down here. So if you want to win the game, you're not going up here into the plains, which is only worth 1. These suburbs, there's just a ton of population in suburbs and cities. So those are basically the battlefield where you're trying to get victory points. How do you get victory points? Well, the cities and the suburbs have these status markers You see this one that says revolt. This one says revolt. That's in Denver. Down here in Phoenix, no status. Over here in Los Angeles, we've got a status called order. I'll explain what those things are, but basically, red is going to be a good outcome for the rebels. The rebels are red. You can see this. Here's their HQ down here. And the other side, the federals, the government, is blue. And I want to emphasize, okay, the red and the blue don't have anything to do with the color of political parties. This is the convention of war simulation, where the government forces are the blue and whoever is opposing the government forces are the red. Okay, so that's where the red and the blue come from. In designing the game, I objectively and purposefully tried to stay away from any current political issues. I'm interested in the mechanics of conflict, not what might set it all off. Okay, so where was I? So we got my status, and the rebels are trying to get it red into revolt, and the federals are trying to get it into blue, into order. Well, we got some highways. It's not all the highways, so a few representative highways. Interstate 80, 90. Here's 95 down here. Here's the 5 in California. Okay, and those obviously make movement better. Here's 55 down here. 10 along the southern part of the country. Famous freeways. Let's see. So I think that's everything on the map. We've got Canada as a potential space, and Mexico. There's special spaces that only get activated by cards. The terrain that you see, so like forest versus grassland versus mountain, affects certain mechanics mildly. Okay, it's not like a huge effect, but it does have some effect on combat efficiency. We have a thing called the social media track. So this is in the future, right? So we assume that all the combatants are active on social media or on the internet in general. If this little chit, this social media thing, is on a red space, that means the rebels have the social media edge. Okay, and the social media edge plays a role in tiebreakers and some fairly critical operations for the rebels. And the blue here, if the thing's down here, I guess you could flip it over. If it's down here, that means that the federals have the social media advantage. So the two sides can fight over who has the better memes, basically. Here's a thing, a really important indicator called the rebellion power track. So this track gives you a number. So if the little marker's there, the number is 2. If the marker's over here, the number is 4. What is that number used for? It's used to basically add to the power of rebel cards. Okay, so here it's really good for the federals because no power is being added to rebel cards. If it's over here, their cards are worth 4 more, which is a whole lot. Okay, which will all be explained. You know how it goes when you're having someone teaching a game. They keep saying, "We'll get to that. We'll get to that." There's quite a lot of random selection of regions, cities, and suburbs. So these are the tables. They're weighted by population. If you want to pick a random region, you roll here. If you want to pick a random city or suburb, you choose here. So like this, if you're choosing suburbs, 9 would be the Denver suburb. And if you're choosing cities, 9 would be the Denver city. For our vassal thing, we've got places to put our cards as we play them. There's actually one over here to the right as well. Where are you? There you are. And then up here is a combination of two things. It's got a victory point track, basically. This here is the victory points for blue, and this is the victory points for red. So just looking at the red one, it says revolt plus bases. What that means is total population that is in revolt plus the bases that the rebel has out there. Here's a base. Here's a rebel base right here. Okay. And it's currently at 21. And the Federals have the same thing, right? Order plus their bases. So that the rebels want revolt, of course, and the Federals want order. They're both at 21 at the start of this scenario. This is one of the two scenarios at the end of the book. Just briefly about the scenarios. One of them is a revolution out in the countryside. So here you see militia units here out in the countryside and government forces being in the cities. Okay. And then the other scenario, the rebels are in the cities and the government forces are more in the countryside. So this same track is also a money track. So resources, federal resources and rebel resources. Both start at 30, cannot exceed 30. There are ways to tax and fundraise for both sides to get it up. But pretty much every operation costs something. All right, so those are all the features on the map. Let me give you an overview of the decks. So we have two decks that we work with. This is the main deck. This is the card, the main playing card thing. So the way the sequence of play works is both sides start with a hand of cards. The rebel plays two, then the federal plays two. So you can do like card synergies and stuff like that. Keep playing until neither side has any cards anymore, and then you get a new hand of cards. That's the basic sequence of play. And just briefly to talk about the cards, they're the standard sort of this is an event and this is the ops. Okay, so you can play a card for the ops or you can play it for the events. This is a neutral card, so either side can play it. This is a red card, a rebel card. So the rebel has the option of playing, if he has this card, he can play it for one op or play it for the event. If the federal has the card, okay, he can play it for ops, but the rebel gets the event. Okay, so part of the strategy is, if I'm the federal and I have this card in my hand, how do I play it in such a way so that when the rebel gets this event, it doesn't hurt me that much? So that's pretty standard. So again, if the rebel player had it, he could play it for one ops, but the federal player would get this event. I don't have too much time to go into what the specific events are. I'll just say that they reflect kind of what we know about life in the United States with the internet and all kinds of technology stuff happening and everything from truck stops to deer hunters to nanobots and things like this. I mean, some of them kind of have dark humor. Like I think there's an Amish card. Oh, I guess it shuffles when you go back in. Like just look at this one. State media unrest is a mechanic in the game that helps the rebels. So state media, meaning like official government media, controls narratives so you can reduce the amount of unrest in the country. Okay, so people using gene editing to make children. This one's fun. This is a super flu. I came up with this before COVID, but a death virus escapes containment and it gets out somewhere in Washington, and this plague token moves around the country. That's a fun one. Armored police vehicles, Route 66. So that just gives it's neutral. It lets people move between LA and New York City. So you can see some of these things are quite serious, and some of them are just kind of fun Americana. As fun as anything can be in this kind of a scenario. Deer season. So when you have experienced hunters, the rebels gain 4 militia, and so on. Here's right. If the federals, this says Second Amendment, federal gun confiscation program backfires. So imagine if the federal government tried to go confiscate guns. Well, that would create a lot of unrest, and that's what happens. Now, all these cards follow the golden rule of card driven games. That is, if the event says something in it and it violates the written rules in the rule book, the event takes precedent. So that's a look at those cards. Now, there's less important cards called story cards. And these cards live only on this board over here through mechanics that I will explain. These cards are what determine what the rebellion power track is at. So let's say we had these 3 cards here. What you would do basically is you'd add up the rebellion 4 plus 0 plus 3. Oh, that's 7. And so you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that the rebellion power is 2. There's some text on here. It's just for flavor. It doesn't have any effect. But can you imagine if federal agents fired on a family gathering? Well, boy, that would really help the rebellion, wouldn't it? And this is a measure of how quickly this story gets into the news, this virality factor. Okay. Through a mechanic I'll explain later. All right. There's a lot of we'll get to that at the start of every rules. I'm just giving you an overview of the board. Let's look at some of the pieces. So this is a federal troop. Okay. It has only one side. It doesn't flip over. And it represents just one unit of force. There is no stacking limit for these guys, so as many as possible could be in a region or a city. There's a hard limit on the number of these in the game. The Federals have 3 bases. There's some already on the board. Oh yeah, here's one. Okay, so that's the last base. There's a couple of federal bases out there, so it's a base. Bases improve your recruiting ability. These are to measure card effects. Like there's a situation where the rebels set up a capital, there's a plague going around, etc., etc. These little guys are probably the most important ones, okay? Because the more unrest that get placed on a region, suburb, or city, the more likely it is to shift from being blue to being red. So a big part of what the rebels are trying to do is get these little dudes placed on various areas, regions. Okay, these have card effects. Here's some rebel bases. Something to say about the rebel pieces is they have two sides. This is an active rebel. So they're out and about, they're riding around in their pickup trucks, and as such are visible and easier to take out. When they go sleeper, okay, see the bar there, now they're underground, harder to catch. Yeah, those are the playing pieces. Oh, one last thing here. We have the reserves. So if you play a card and you have leftover ops points, you can put them into the reserves and then use them on a later card. So I think what might make sense to do here is to go through the different operations of the two sides. When you start out the game, you have to set the news cycle, the initial news cycle. So let's get our stories out here. So you just draw 3 of these cards and put them out there, and then put 3 in the pool. And we'll explain all this later, but all we need to know right now is the rebellion power factor is 0 plus 2 plus 1 is 3. So this is 1, 2, 3. Okay. So our RPF, rebellion power factor, is in the third space from the right, and so the factor itself is 1. Well, let's draw a rebel hand. Let's get some cards in here. Okay. And you see I've got some blues, so I'm going to have to somehow try and ditch those or make them ineffective. I got 3 grays. Why don't I? Can I move them around like that? Yeah, a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I probably shouldn't move them around too much. So these are the options. So let's say Rebel says for his first move, he says, okay, I'm going to play this card. Okay, he's going to be able to play 2 cards. He plays something that says self-driving cars. So if you have a car that can drive itself, it's like a robotic bomb. And so auto bombs remove 2 agents, no more than 1 per space. So that's the event I could do. Okay, but instead of doing that event, let's say I'm going to try and recruit. Okay, I want to get more militia on the map. I've got these guys hanging out in Texas. I guess there's a couple of them down there. Down here in Appalachia, I've got a couple. Over here in Chicago, I got 4 in Chicago. So, and I got 4 in the Midwest. So, I got people up here, and you'll be able to see what they can do soon enough. Okay, and I got some down here. Where do I want more? Well, here's the problem. When the rebels go to do a lot of their operations, they fall into this category called internet ops. Okay, so think this through. In the age of the internet, nobody raises up an armed force by going to a town and getting everybody together, right? They go on the internet and they put out a video, or they put out a meme, or they have a post or something. They put out some audio track, podcast or something, and out it goes. It goes out in the country, and in your podcast, you're saying we need more men, we need more soldiers, we need more troops. Well, you don't know where they're going to show up, right? You don't know where that message is going to land. Okay. So this first rebel net op that I'm talking about here is called recruit. That's in section 10.2.2 of the rules. And here's how that operation works. I take the ops of the card, which is 1, and then I add the RPF, which is 1. So I'm going to select 2 spaces that are going to get this effect, this recruiting effect. And the recruiting effect is you go ahead and put down a militia in whatever space you select. You have to choose a type. Let's say I'm choosing regions. I would like to have more guys in regions. Or tackle, since the suburbs seem pretty unoccupied right now, let's say I craft a message that I think is going to hit home in suburbs, because look how all this population and there's nobody there. So let's say I pick suburbs. All right. So what I do is I roll on this and see which city I got. Let's say I got a 5. Okay, so I'm the rebel. I rolled 5. It's San Francisco. How about that? So what I do is I take a militia. How about you? You're getting the war here. All right, so you show up there in San Francisco. Now I have a rebel militia in San Francisco. And I get to do that again because I've got a total of 2 power on the card. 1, 2. Now the thing is, as long as the rebels have the social media edge, they actually get to choose one space. So it's not completely throwing darts at the wall. They can choose a space. So I'm like, well, San Francisco suburb, that's nice, but it's actually not that populated. Let's see. And I don't want to go in the Dallas suburbs because it's already revolting. There's already a revolt there. I want to put my guys somewhere where I've got a lot of population, but the status isn't against me already. For the one that I can choose, I'm going to choose Phoenix here. I'm gonna put down my militia guy right here in Phoenix. Very eager soldiers. So there he is. Now so I got a sleeper cell in San Francisco, which is kind of meh, but now I got one in Phoenix, which is awesome. The first time that you affect a space, you test it. In other words, you determine its initial status. We're trying to determine the status of this suburb of Phoenix, and it can be in one of these four. When you first test a space that doesn't have a status, 1, 2, 3, it's anger. 4, 5, 6, it's defiance. So anger is closer to order and defiance is closer to revolt. The idea is, okay, here's order. Everyone's peaceful. Oh, they're mad at the government. Oh, they're defying the government. Here they're in active revolt. The red wants it here. The blue wants it here. So let's say we rolled a 4, 5, 6. So it's going to be in defiance. Okay. This number is going to come into play. The higher the number, the harder it is for the federals to do something with an area. Okay, just so you know. We'll get to that mechanic later. So right now we're recruiting, and so we got our recruit there in San Francisco suburb and in Phoenix suburb. This one was chosen, and when he showed up, we first learned that this Phoenix suburb was a defiance status. So that's recruiting. When you recruit, you got to pay. So that cost me $1. That cost me $1. $2. Rebel resources. 1, 2. So pretty much every operation costs you a buck, a dollar. Let's do. Gosh, I am not liking the status of the news cycle display. I want to figure out, is there some way that I can change that? So here's how I would do it. There's a thing called a social media action. Okay, and that's how you affect this thing. So out of the rebel hand, I'm going to take this guy. Okay, I'm going to play this as my second card. Now that is a federal card. So it means that I would get 3 ops, but the federal guy would get this event. Okay. And it allows him to just remove unrest in different places because he's got like some super data capability. I don't want that. That's no good. So what I do is I play it on the social media action, which allows me to ignore the event. So once per hand, you can play the enemy card and ignore the event. So that event doesn't happen, but I get 3 ops to play on social media. Now, social media is really cool. It gives you a lot of different things you can do. You kind of have like this menu of different things you could do with social media, and each one of them costs a certain something. So, like if I wanted to draw a new card from here and put it in here, well, that would cost me 1 ops. I could do that 3 times because I got 3 ops. And actually, I've got 4 because remember, it's the ops value plus the RPF. I forgot that. So it's 4. So I could like draw 4 cards and put them in here. Or I could censor one of these. I could get rid of one. Okay. For a cost of 2 ops, I could move this 1 space. So with 4, I could move this way. And there are various reasons why I wouldn't want to do that. It's already in the best spot possible for me as the rebel. But here's something I can do. I can do something called distract. This thing on the social media menu is basically you throw something out at social media that totally messes with the current narrative, and it causes you to do something called cycling the news. So here's what cycling the news is. So basically the action I'm choosing for this card is to cycle this. Why? Because I don't like having an RPF of 1. I don't like having it be in space 3 here. I would love to get this thing down here, right? When you cycle the news, you get rid of the bottom one, the top 2 move down, and then you choose one from here and put it there. Now, the rules say that the story with the highest virality is the one that goes in here. Okay, these are the stories that people are paying attention to. These are the ones that are up and coming. You can see here, they're all the same. So the person with the social media edge, which is me, gets to pick which one they want to go forward. So boom. And now my rebellion factor is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now my RPF is 2, which is a lot better. That's a lot better than 1. I'd love to have it up here. I have 1 ops left, and if I look in the rules and say, okay, what else can I do? It says I can discard a story from the story pool for 1 ops. Or I can draw a new one. Let's see. Since these are viral 1, let's just draw a new one for 1 ops and put it in here. Oh, that wasn't good. That was actually really bad because now this one has high viral. So the next time the news gets cycled, this story is everybody's going to be paying attention to this one. And it's, these two will move down. And so this one goes off and then we get a big 0. So the next time the news cycles, I'm going to be down to space 4, which is right here in an RPF of 1. So, I don't know if that worked out so well. But anyway, I got rid of this event. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's discard those 2. And we learned something about the way the rebel recruits by using that business where you choose spaces. Let me just tell you briefly what other things follow that basic mechanic. What other things have internet operations mechanic? So I showed you raising up militia. You can fundraise. Okay, so you could use that same procedure to select spaces and then you get money based on their population. So if I had selected Phoenix for fundraising, I would have gotten $3. That would have been nice. I still have quite a lot of money up here though, so I'm okay. The other thing that you can do is create unrest. And the way that would happen, so let's say I was doing this one for the unrest internet operation. Again, in this case, I would have 1 ops from the card, 2 RPF. So I've got 3 ops total. And I would use this procedure to select spaces. Let's say I picked suburbs again. And this unrest mechanic affects any place that is in order. Okay, so let's say let's say I did a die roll. Say I picked suburbs again, and I rolled a 10, and I got suburban Chicago. So let's put our unrest in suburban Chicago. Okay, so now we got some unrest in suburban Chicago. And then I would do that for other spaces, right? However many ops I have, I would do that for other spaces. After you put out the unrest in the unrest option, you go around and you look and you check and you say, okay, wherever there's unrest that I just placed, is the number of unrest greater than the number on the status? So let's say right now I had a total of 3 unrest here in Chicago. There's my 3 unrest in suburban Chicago. Well, 3 unrest is greater than the 2 here. So that would increase its revolt status. Okay, we would shift from 2 to 3. That's the effect of the unrest. Placing unrest is how the rebel player shifts the status of these things from initially order all the way to revolt. When it was just 2, okay, I needed 3 unrest in here to move it up. Okay, so let's say, and I did. Now, how much population is in suburban Chicago? My goodness, there's 3 population there. Okay, 3 population. So as rebel, I just gained 3 victory points, right? I moved this into revolt. And so revolt plus bases now for the red is higher. Okay, it's not at 21, it's 22, 23, 24. So that's how the rebel gets victory points, by dropping unrest in places. And then of course this unrest goes away. So that's called the unrest mechanic. A little bit complicated, might take a while for you to get it figured out, but basically there is a mechanic for the rebel player to put unrest down in spaces, and with enough unrest then these spaces start shifting. Look at this. You only need to drop 1 unrest in suburban New York to get from order to anger. Why? Because remember, it shifts if the number of unrest is bigger than the status of the space. The status is 0. Put down 1 unrest, boom, it goes up to anger. Okay? And that would cost, see, just that one move costs the federal player 3 victory points, right? He needs spaces to be in order like this. Well, now we've got anger here, so that we go down 1, 2, 3, if you had placed an unrest there. So that explains how the unrest thing is. The remaining rebel operations are not internet operations. They're standard sort of kinetic warfare operations. One is called move, and the other is called attack. And these are pretty standard things. So a move would be taking some militia, one group of militia, and moving them somewhere. And it costs money. You have to reduce your resources. So they can always move for free from one space to another. They can go on the interstates, though, an unlimited number of spaces. So these guys could hop on 90 and just go all the way around. They could go anywhere. They could go anywhere in the country. Okay, here's the thing. Here's what restricts them. If they go through a space that has federal agents in it, they lose one of their units to being arrested. So just think, if I'm the federal player, I would rather get this guy out of central Seattle and get him out into the suburbs. So if my rebel friend tries to take Interstate 90 to get down to San Francisco or LA, he's at least got to go through these checkpoints and he's going to lose somebody. There's four of them there. Going through suburban Seattle, in this case, cost him one. And if the Federals had an agent out here, it would cost him another. Every space they enter that has at least one Federal is interdicted for them. And so they have to lose a troop to being arrested. So the interstates, great, they allow you to move anywhere in the country, but they're choke points. And so the central government the federals can move things. And I made the cities in a way that I think this is unique to the United States. Every American city has a ring highway around it. It's always possible to go right around the central city. And that's why having troops in the central city is not that great when it's a rural rebellion, because the rebels will be moving around on these highways and they don't have to go through downtown Seattle. Like nobody has to go through downtown LA to get, from Phoenix to San Francisco. Nobody has to go right into the center of the city of Dallas to get from the west side of Texas to the east side. You don't have to, right? Because they all have these ring cities, but you always have to go through the suburbs. These ring highways are always in the suburbs. And in fact, to go from a city to a region or vice versa, you always have to go through a suburb. So whoever has got troops out here in the suburbs, like here's a fight going to happen here, is controlling that very easy highway movement. And that's by design, right? The central cities are on purpose in our country. They're just sort of set off and the highways route around them. The other kinetic option for the rebels is just to fight. And a fight, what they do is for every militia in a space that has federal agents, you roll a die, you pay $1, of course, you roll a d6, and you subtract the ops value of the card. So if you played a 3 on this, you only played a 1, adding 2 is 3. But let's say you played a 3 and the RPF was like up here, right? Think about that. That's a 3 power card plus a 3 RPF. You can select as many spaces as desired, and each one gets basically +6. So you're guaranteed to win. And every militia takes out one federal agent. The specific mechanic is you select as many spaces as you want. And again, this is not internet operations. You can actually say, I want to fight in San Francisco. You roll the d6, you subtract the ops value of the card, which in this case is 1, 2, 3 is our total ops value. So we roll d6 minus 3. If you get equal to or less than the control factor of the space, which is this number, you wipe out a unit. So actually, we forgot to give this an initial. I basically, for this guy, I'd roll a d6 and subtract 3. And if I got 1 or less, this guy would be dead. Okay. Cities and mountains subtract 2 from that die roll. So I'm saying that guerrilla fighters are very effective in central cities and in mountainous areas, and subtract 1 in forest and desert. Okay, so that's how some of the terrain effects come in. So you get an overall sense of what the rebel can do. The rebel has the ability to use the internet with some targeting down here because of the social media track, but not a lot, to do things like raise money, raise troops, and make people upset. Okay, make them upset at the government. It's kind of a scattershot approach, and the rebel player has to take advantage of where things happen. Okay, so those are the internet operations of the rebels. The kinetic operations are to take those troops that have been raised and either move them around or engage in combat. It's just a simple, like the red attacks the the blue and gets so and so many hits, more or less. Okay. So let's switch over to the Federals. The Federals do not have internet operations, right? Their task on the internet is to stop rebel operations. The government here has a limited ability to inspire the people in the way that the rebels do. Why? Because they're the government. Let's draw us up a federal hand here. Okay, so here we have a set of cards. Not that great a draw for the Federals. They've got one, two of their own cards, and they got one, two, three, four rebel cards. And there, two of them are huge, and the other two are, they're not little. So the Federal at this is going to have to almost certainly play this one or this one on social media where it cancels the event. Okay, and they'll have to decide what to do a little bit later. And then there are these neutral ones. By the way, this is how I handled foreign affairs. There are cards that for China, Canada, Mexico, and so on. Okay, so let's say, and some of them have fairly complicated mechanics, which is for players to explore. I just want to do the basic mechanics here. So let's say a federal player goes ahead and plays this games, movies, TV, and that's the event. Couch potatoes leave real world. Take one card at random from the rebel hand. So the idea is the rebels are trying to get everyone stirred up to fight the government, but you know what? Teenagers, young people, they're just watching TV, playing video games. So the effect of this is that the government can just sort of steal a card from the rebel. Again, like I said, it's not everything is not dark here. That's kind of a humorous effect, but it reflects something that's probably going to be real in 2040. So the Federals, let's say they play this for operations, not for the event. Okay, and so they're playing it for two ops. The Federals don't get any kind of a boost like from the Rebellion power track. Okay, they don't get anything like that. They just get bam. You just get two ops. And some of the things you can do with your two operations. Well, you choose spaces with these ops. So you can choose two spaces. Let's say I'm going to choose suburban New York, and because it's in order, and I'm going to choose urban New York. So we're just going to choose two spaces, New York City and New York suburb. And the option I'm going to do is called tax. That's 10.3.1. And that gives me $2 per population. So that would give me 6 and 6, 12. Very lucrative to be taxing in here. Okay. Now, the thing is, if you choose an area for taxation and it doesn't have a federal agent, this one does, but this one doesn't, it gets an unrest, right? Because you're sending in the dudes to tax, and you don't have any military backup. It's just the IRS all by itself. Yikes. And so you get unrest here, and that would be very, very bad because if the rebel is able to get this spot selected in his unrest action, it's got more unrest than the control factor of the space, the 0. So the rebel could fairly easy flip this away from its order status, costing, as I said before, 3 victory points for the Federals. So I don't know, maybe that wasn't very smart to get my taxes from here and here. There's an overall maximum on resources of 30, so it would make no sense right now anyway, because the federal has, all this money. Taxing is something that the federal can do. The federal can deploy, okay? So for deploy, the federal chooses as many spaces as he wants, pays $1 per space, and all those spaces have to be in order with a control factor of 0, okay? Or they have to have a base. There's a base, right? So there's a base here. This is an order, but there's a base. So the feds can deploy here. In each place that you select, each space, okay, you've paid $1 for each one, you get to deploy a number of agents equal to the value of the card. So you see the federal advantage, even though he has fewer ops, is that he can pick where things go. He's much more sure. Like when he raises troops, those troops get raised exactly where he wants them. And just as many as he wants. It's not a random thing. Okay, so raise money through taxation, deploy troops is a federal thing. The federals can move. So suppose the federals want to move. Their move action is similar to the rebels. You can move for free like that from one space to another to an adjacent space, or you can hop on the highway. Now, this whole thing is the Midwest region. So you can hop on any highway in the Midwest region. So let's say I wanted to go from take these guys from the Midwest all the way out to San Francisco via, no, even better. Let's say I want to go down to Dallas with these guys. Okay, so I hop on one highways here in the green region. I'm going to hop on here, 55 South. I take 55 South. I enter the plains. Okay, there's no militia here, so I got no worries. But the minute I enter the South, there's militia in the South. That costs me $1. So my resources are up here. So it's convoy security, right? Whenever federal agents have to go through an area that has militia presence, they have to tighten up on their security, and it costs money. Okay, so that costs one. It costs $1 for every space you enter that has militia in it. All right. So now here I go down, I take Route 10. I'm going into Texas. Right here, I cross into the Texas region. Okay, militia in this region. So I pay another dollar. Right? So, and I end up here in the suburbs of Dallas. So it cost me $2 to move here from the Midwest region down here into the Dallas suburbs. And that's how movement works. So I've talked about the operations of the feds. They've got the ability to raise money with tax. They've got the ability to put more troops on the map with deploy, and they've got the ability to move. Okay. So the next thing they do is, what do you think? Attack the militia. So that operation is called Hunt 10.3.4. Let's say they'd stopped here. Oh, we're going to fight these militias. And it's similar mechanic to the way the militia fight, right? The blue side attacks the red side and sees how many hits it gets. Now, you have to pay. So if I'm going to hunt here in the South, I got to pay $1 plus the control factor. So if a place is in revolt, it's a lot more expensive to operate there. Right? If we want to hunt down here in the South, we want to hunt these guys, it costs $1 plus this. It costs $4 to do that. Okay, that's pretty expensive. But we want to wipe these guys out. And once you've done that, each blue guy in the space affects one red guy. So here's that. This guy is hanging out here. Right? So the blue affects the red. There's no die roll as it is with the rebels. Instead, it's just an effect. If it's a sleeper cell, you wake it up. If it's already awake, you eliminate it. Okay, so the superior weapons and organization of the blue troops comes through here. They don't have to roll. They sweep in and find somebody and wake them up. Okay, and so that's all that would happen here is we get two of them woken up. If they came in and these guys were already visible, right, the blue would just take them out. Okay, and in that case, they could also take out the base. The base has to be the last thing out there. So in the former case where these rebels were sleepers, go to sleep, rebels. Okay. This guy would affect that guy, flush him out. This guy affects that guy, flush him out. This guy cannot take the base because the base has to be the last piece killed. Okay, and these guys are still protecting it. They're flushed out, but still protecting it. So that's how fighting works for the Federals. Now the Federals have one operation left, and they better, because so far they haven't done anything to affect their own victory points. Right? They're trying to get these spaces to go from revolt, right, to just defiance, and then from defiance down to anger, and ultimately they want to get them to order. There's two other things that they can do, two other operations, and they're kind of important because this is how the federal guy actually gets victory points, right? We haven't shown you anything about how the federal gets his victory points. And remember, he's trying to get the status into order. So how does he do that? Well, there's kind of a offensive and a defensive thing. Let's do the defensive one first. It's called pacify. It's 10.3.5. Pacify is the way that the government gets rid of unrest. So remember, these unrest things are what tip a space over in the rebel direction. So to get rid of these, it's defensive. The Federals just pick spaces and pay $1 per space, and they can remove a number of unrest markers up to the ops value of the card. So if I'd played this to get rid of unrest, I could get rid of up to 3 unrest in each space that I chose, paying $1 per space. And the one restriction is that the Federals have to have control of the space. That means they have to have more of their agents than rebels. So if we take this guy and he was here, they couldn't do their pacify move here. There they would. Actually, they'd have to have 2, not just 1, but 2. So they'd have to have 2 in order to get rid of that unrest. Okay. But that guy's And so that's pacified. And then the last one, this is the victory points. They're in favor of the Federals. It's called secure. And the way secure works is you pick a space, you get one space per action. So if I choose a secure action, I have to pick a space. The ops value of the card, it has to be at least equal to the control factor of the space. So if I'm trying to affect a space that's in revolt, I have to have a 3 ops card. If I want to affect this something that's just in anger, I could do that with a 1 ops card. There can't be any unrest in the space, so I got to clear out the unrest in that space first. It has to have at least 3 agents in it, plus 1 for every militia. So let's say we take suburban Los Angeles, no unrest, no militia there. If I could get my 3 agents over here somehow to suburban LA, now I've got all the requirements met for this secure operation 10.3.6. My 3 agents, the ops value of the card is going to be higher than whatever the control factor is. And remember, the first time we go into a place, we do anger at a 1, 2, 3, defiance at a 4, 5, 6. Let's say it rolled out as defiance. Okay, so we test the space the first time we use it. It's at 2. I played a 3 card. 3 is bigger than true. So I can do my secure operation. Okay. Now, the secure operation, all it does is it moves the space one step towards order. So we are at defiance. So we go to anger. And then we have to pay the control factor plus 2 for that. So the control factor was here. So we have to pay $4 for this move. It's an intense operation. So when the control factor was 2 before, you have to pay $2 plus the 2, 4. And then you have to have ops value at least equal to what that control factor was, and you have to have a lot of forces on the ground. And then you can start moving it. And if they did it again, right, it'd go from anger to order, and then they'd get the 3 victory points for um, suburban LA. All right. That's a set of federal operations. And just to kind of pull back a little bit and give a summary overview, the way the game works, the red plays 2 cards, the blue plays 2 cards. They're similar in that they can raise money, put troops on the board, move the troops, fight, and do basically psyops to try and affect hearts and minds, affect the status of the spaces, and try to get victory points that way. The first side that gets up to 35 up here wins the game. Okay. But you can also win the game by completely wiping out the enemy's forces. If you win the game, if you get up here and the enemy has 25 or less, it's considered a decisive victory. And that would be like a situation of peace happens, like one side decisively wins and the other side just is quiet from then on. That's unlikely though. Most times we play tested it, it ends up looking something like this. Yeah, so I just want to say to everybody, thanks for listening. I hope you get something out of the game. If you have any questions or criticisms, I'd be happy to hear them because I have other games I want to do, and it's always good to hear criticism of something that you've done. It's a great privilege to put something like this out and have other people play it. It's a great privilege to be able to do this. So I thank you all, and I wish you all a blessed evening. Thanks to Mo for putting this on. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.